Hey everyone, we're back again with another My Hero Academia Season 5 review. You know, as we will be every week. Last week gave us the first true episode of the season, giving us the 411 on what happened after Endeavor and Hawks' encounter with Dabi, the reasons why Hawks was meeting with Dabi in private, some Todoroki family drama, and the inner machinations of Deku's mind with the One for All predecessors. It was a pretty informative episode for sure, so be sure to check out that video if you haven't already. This week's Before the Opening theme opening didn't really give us anything new to discuss, so we can just jump right into the bulk of this episode. As the episode truly begins, we cut to Deku going on a nice, therapeutic early morning jog. As it turns out, having dead people speak to you in your dreams, causing you to destroy your room, isn't exactly something that's comforting, so he wasn't able to go back to sleep. We get an extra scene of Aoyama scolding him for the ruckus, suggesting he isn't having enough cheese, a salient point. As Deku continues to recall the dream he remembers so vividly, he points out that as soon as he touched hands with the first wielder of One for All, the dream ended with all the predecessors watching him. Very ominous stuff going on here. So, naturally, Deku decides to take this up with All Might later on in the day. As he speaks with his master, Deku brings up to All Might that he had previously mentioned that he too once saw the vestiges when he was younger. The reason All Might was even able to teach Midoriya about One for All's origin was because of the fact that All Might had seen these vestiges and brought them up to his master, Nana Shimura. To All Might's surprise, Deku says that the first spoke directly to him, mentioning how he was only at 20% and how they had reached the singularity. This sparks a flashback in All Might from when he was younger and had his vestige conversation with Nana. She mentions how the quirk had stockpiled a lot, something more than just power, but the feelings and desires of those who wielded it before them. All Might feels that it's a bit occult. However, Nana refers to this as an impossible dream, and that should any of them meet their end, they can meet again within One for All. At the end of all that, it just leaves the two confused with no obvious direction to go in. The talk about singularity piques All Might's interest, however, and they both ponder what that could have been about. Deku mentions how, according to the quirk singularity doomsday theory, that as quirks mix and evolve through the generations, they become more powerful and could even become uncontrollable. Clearly something to think about here, as Deku has never had the best control of One for All. I mean, it was brought from two quirks fusing together many years ago, and All Might really did strengthen the hell out of it for decades upon decades. So, for the audience, it's really not surprising to hear that Deku could be a prime example of this theory. Another thing that confuses young Midoriya here is the fact that there were two vestiges that he could not see at all, and that All Might's was pretty blurry, though he just chalks that up to him being a still relatively new addition to the predecessor club. Or, you know, because he's not dead. That's a strong possibility too. With all that being said, the two of them are at a stalemate, but All Might wishes to continue investigating more about One for All with his protege. After all this discussion, we get rewarded with a big All Might smile as Deku talks about how pretty Nana was. As Deku and All Might travel down the halls with their idle chit-chat, Aizawa catches them in the act. All Might tries to blame Midoriya for forcing him to talk to him, but Eraser isn't buying it. In fact, he looks pretty disgusted. As it turns out, Shinzo was also with the Eraser. Gee, I wonder why he's here. Probably not too important. Anywho, Aizawa tells Midoriya to go warm up, as they'll be having a busy day, and we finally get the title card halfway into the episode. As we move on to a short of Class A all huddled up, they point out that a lot of them have changed their costumes to a more winter-friendly style. Deku specifically calls out Bakugo's and starts praising it, much to his chagrin. Ojiro also points out that Deku has got some upgrades to his costume as well, which he explains is due to him being able to do a lot more than he used to, and that Hatsume was a big help in making his gear stronger. Funnily enough, just the mention of Hatsume's name makes Uraraka's eyebrow twitch and causes her to get really embarrassed when thinking of her physical encounter with Deku. In the next scene, Class B comes through with their introductions, and of course, they're being led by Monoma, giving a very Monoma monologue. During this long-winded speech of his, he mentions how they won a preference poll from the school festival over Class 1A by just 2 votes, relishing in any victory his class could get over theirs. Thankfully, Eraser shuts Monoma up by choking him a little, so thank you for that. And now, the big reveal. Boom. Shinzo will be joining the joint program in the hopes that he'll be able to transfer to the hero course. One funny thing from the big Shinzo reveal is that it has Ojiro shaking. He still seems to be not a big fan of being brainwashed by the guy, but could you really blame him? The students point out Aizawa's cloth bindings around his neck, as well as the funky mask he has. As Shinzo introduces himself to both hero classes, he basically is straightforward and to the point. He's not here to be friends with all 40 of these kids. He wants to be a hero, and is unfortunately much farther behind than everyone else. So, they're all obstacles that he needs to overcome in order to achieve that dream, all the while having Deku in his sights. With that out of the way, the teachers decide it's time to start. The training will consist of 5 4-on-4 battles between the two classes, with Shinzo participating in 2 matches himself, one as an ally to Class A and another as an ally to Class B. Some of the students felt that when those matches come up, that it might be a little unfair to the teams with only 4 students on them, but Vlad King points out that it's actually more of a con than a pro, as Shinzo's lack of experience will be a bit of a disadvantage to the team that has him. That said, the rules are laid out for the battle. The first team to capture 4 of the other team wins, and that they should be thinking of each other as villains. This causes an internal crisis for Ida once again, as being a villain is really tough on him. But having to be both hero and a villain at the same time just seems to scramble his brain a bit. As they all discuss the exercise, Bakugo points out the wording of the exercise, showing that even with Shinzo being a 5th wheel, if 4 people get captured, they'll lose despite having 5 in total. With all the explanation out of the way, the 2 classes can pick their lots and make up their 10 teams of 4. After Class A and Class B have their go, Shinzo picks his 2 teams, which end up being Team Froppy, Koda, Kaminari, and Kirishima on the Class A side of things, whereas of Class B's, he's on Monama's team against Team Mineta, Ashido, Uraraka, and Deku, perfectly setting up a nice rematch between the 2 hero hopefuls. Deku still has the vested stuff on his mind, but he doesn't let that get in his way of excitement to see everyone in action. He's so hyped that he manifests one of his hero notebooks out of nowhere. Just before the first match begins, we get one last tidbit of information on the matches. They're 20 minutes long, and if there's no decisive victory by the end, whichever team ends up with the most captures will be declared the winner. In the nick of time, All Might and Midnight join to observe the training session. When asked who he thinks will fare best, All Might is unsure, as he points out that while Class A has had a lot of real-world experiences, Class B had far less interruptions to their curriculum, and their grades have gradually gotten better over time. And now, the first match finally begins. We start off with a back and forth between the Class A team as they try and devise the best strategy for taking on their opponents. Kaminari points out how tough Shiozaki is as an opponent, especially because he lost to her pretty badly during the sports festival. Shinzo mentions he wants to take out the person with the most troublesome quirk first, which is the natural mindset to have. That said, Froppy points out that their opponents are probably thinking the same thing in regards to Kaminari, as well as the fact, despite his lack of experience, Shinzo is a formidable adversary with his brainwashing quirk. Using any voice, Koda hears from the birds that Shiozaki is nearby, using her vines to fill out their surroundings first. This reconnaissance is immediately met with a surprise attack from Shishida. Shishida's quirk is Beast, which allows him to become a beast with an increase to his physique, strength, hearing, smell, and sight, with the downside of going into a frenzy while in this beast form. He also has Subaraba with him, who uses his solid air quirk to trap them in a cube prison. Shinzo is then seen using his mask, followed by the sound of Subaraba's voice, giving instructions to the beast to drive Class 1A out. With a quick response, Shishida falls under the spell of Shinzo's brainwashing. Using what he dubs persona chords, Shinzo is able to mimic other people's voices, making whatever he's in a whole lot more interesting. In the preview for the next episode, we see that the battle is getting pretty intense, with Class A seemingly on the ropes. But it looks like, with the use of his extra set of vocal cords, Shinzo might be taking control of the fight. This definitely got me pretty excited for next week's episode, as we have a lot of great fights coming up. Of course, the fated rematch between Deku and Shinzo will be the last fight, but I'm seriously looking forward to seeing how all these other matches play out. We're very familiar with all of Class A's quirks, and a handful of Class B's, but there are so many students that we know nothing about, so finally getting to see them in action is a real delight. Overall, I like this episode a lot, but I can tell it can only get better from here. What did you all think though? Did you like this episode, or was it a little too dialogue heavy for you? Definitely let me know in the comments below. I look forward to seeing what you'll have to say. With that said, I'm going to take my leave. I'll catch you all next Saturday for episode 4.